Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are talking about party games. And we're generally not that into party games, but we've moved, we're in this new place, we're not sure about our background, we don't know what that's going to end up looking like. We've just built our furniture, and so we're going to start having probably new friends come over that we need to introduce to games. So we're thinking about what are those party games you can teach to new players that aren't like party games, but are still fun.
Yeah, so it's party games for people who don't like party games, and where your parties also might be on the smaller side of things. So sometimes party games are like high player counts. Some of our games will be for 4 players.
We love those 4-player parties. I think our keys really are that we can teach people in like a minute, 2 minutes tops. And if we're playing with someone who's one of those people who's like, you know what, let's just play and learn it, that they could just play and learn it. So it's those sorts of games, and we got a whole range, and this is not a top 10 like 10 to 1. This is just 10 games that we all think fit that and that we would suggest to someone in that situation.
The first game is Stomp the Plank, which is an adorable game where you're an elephant and you are hoping to try and get all the other elephants to walk down the plank or put enough weight on it that they plunge into the waters below. And how you do that is you flip cards, and it's a push your luck as you try and make everybody else fall over.
Yeah, it is. It's just pure push your luck. That's all this game is. You flip cards. If ever the 2 cards match, you got to move forward on the plank. If you flip them and they're all different and you stop while they're all different, the more you get, the more weight goes on everybody else's, and it goes on everyone's at the same time. And it's just so much fun. Oh, and there's one more thing, that if you get, what is it, 6 or 7?
I don't know. If you get to the end of the row,
if you do enough, you just automatically win. And I love when games have a little automatic fun win condition that you really want to push to.
Yeah, and the nice thing about that, too, is if you are likely going to lose, you will try and go for that automatic win, and you got a bit of a chance, too.
Yeah, so you're always in this game, and it's just so silly. Like, the elephants are silly, the concept is silly. People look at it and think, oh, what, we're going to play a kid's game? And then they start playing it, and they want to play it again and again and again, because who doesn't love push your luck? It's great. The next one on the list is How Dare You? And this is a pretty brand spanking new one, I think. And this is one that we played fairly recently at a convention. A friend brought it and invited us, and we just played with strangers, which is how we know that this works well in this setting. And what you do in How Dare You is you've got a little trivia question, almost certainly no one knows the answer to. And you give a number. So all these questions are like, what was the longest ever that someone grew their fingernails? How long was the longest nonstop video gaming session? How many Earths fit into Jupiter? And so you give a number, any number, and then the next person has to either raise that number,
yes,
or say, okay, fine, or say, how dare you, and be like offended at you for getting it so wrong. And the game is just like, you take a card if you're wrong, and there's ducks on the cards, you lose by how many ducks there are, but mostly the game is just talking about these ridiculous things and everyone being like, could there be more? Maybe.
Yeah, it really leads to some fun discussions. And there is also the interesting element where you could double the previous person's number.
Right, yes.
Because that will get you more of a bonus if you do. And the questions are really well chosen because the scale is so different sometimes to what you expect. There were times when it went around the whole circle. So all of us had an idea of maybe what it would be. It'd be like maybe a few hundred, and it ended up with being like hundreds of thousands. Like, we would just be so far off, all of us, and it just had some really fun like moments of amazement.
Yeah, and we would have been sitting there and someone would have been like 120, and then someone's like, you know what? I'm going to double it. And everyone's like, what? You're crazy. That's crazy. And then the next person's like, oh, 250, 260, and the answer was like 26,000. And it makes you feel so dumb, but in like the funnest way. And we don't have any pictures because we don't have it, but it's just a fairly ugly deck of cards, but it doesn't matter because the questions are fun and the game's just fun and silly.
The next one on our list is IceCool, and I'm going to be specific with IceCool 2, and it is a wonderful dexterity game. You are penguins, and most of you are trying to skip class, but one penguin is trying to tattle on the other penguins.
It's like a narc penguin.
Yeah, trying to catch them skipping and send them back to class. So you are flicking these penguins, and they have such a great weight to them as well. And with IceCool 2, you are trying to also perform these tricks where you can get your penguins like flipping over doorways and bouncing off walls. So super silly, super fun.
Yeah, and if you're the ones who are trying to sneak, you're trying to capture fish. So there's fish above certain doors. If you get all your fish, then you've successfully skipped class and got your fish. But if you get caught by the hall monitor, then you're out. And the great thing about IceCool 2 is in both of them, you get these cards that give you a random number of points. But in IceCool 2, some of those cards have tricks on them. And if you complete those tricks, then you get extra cards. And those tricks are fun stuff like you have to flip over the top of a doorway. You have to bounce off 2 walls and go through a doorway. So you have to call your shot before. And then you got to do these fancy shots. And everyone is like cheering for you, even if they're on the other side. Like when you do the awesome flip over the door, which I think is the most fun one. Everyone's like, oh, that was so good.
Yeah, the tricks are really fun. And it's also just really fun when you get a lucky shot, too. Like, even if you're the one that gets caught by it, you're like, how did you manage to go through those 2 doorways and hit me?
And if you have an 8-person party, you can get 1 and 2, smush them together, and there's all different ways to play as well. So IceCool 2, but IceCool 1 is also great. Smush them together to have IceCool 3, and it's the best possible experience. Next up is probably the one with the most rules on this list, but that is Camel Up. And there still aren't a lot of rules, and you will pick up this game as you play for sure. So Camel Up is a betting game. It's a kind of a racing game. Camels are running around. Everyone's just betting on those camels. But the great thing is, what you do in the early rounds doesn't matter as much. It's kind of in the later rounds or kind of halfway through when you start betting on who's going to definitely win the race. Because you're betting on who's going to win each round of the race, and you're choosing whether you're betting or you're just rolling dice. And there's not really like a terrible choice you can make on a turn. But then later on, you're also going to be betting on who's going to win the race and who's going to lose the race. But the race is crazy.
Yeah, and what makes it crazy is the camels, not all of them will race in the legs. One of them is always not racing, so you don't know who's going to go. And they won't race the same amount, so a dice value determines how far they're going to go. But camels, as they do in nature, they stack. And so if the bottom camel is the one that's going, it's going to take everything that's on top of it. And then there's, for the latest version of Camel Up, there are the crazy camels that go backwards, and if the camels end up on top of that one, then they're headed in the opposite direction. So if there's an early leader, that one could actually end up like way back at the start if it rides one of those camels a while.
Yeah, and because they go on top, if there's a back camel that just happens to go early in a round and gets on top of a camel, then that camel goes and gets on top of a camel, then that camel goes, then that back camel has gone like 3 times. All of a sudden, it's the front camel. And it's just fun. It's just silly fun. And yeah, we've both played with families, with non-gamers, and everyone I've ever introduced this game to has loved it.
Yeah. The next game on our list is Just One, and everything you need to know about Just One is in the title. It's just one. If you are the guesser, you are just guessing one word. If you are giving a clue, you are just giving a one-word clue. If, when all the clues get revealed and 2 of them match, they get erased because those aren't one individual separate clue.
Yeah, it's such a simple game because when you set it up and everyone's asking you questions, you're like, just one, just one, just one. Can the 2 words match? No, just one. That's every single thing. How many do we want to do on the card? Just one. And I love that about this game. And then it's a cooperative game. So everyone's always involved. Everyone's always cheering for everyone else. And it's kind of a plus and a negative, but there's not really a win condition. You just kind of play. I think there is, but I don't even think anyone knows it. It's like
having 13 cards or something like that.
Right. But we always play that it's just do a round around the table where everyone's successful.
Yeah.
And that's great because it builds up this like excitement when you get to that last person. And
yeah.
They're like, oh, and that's really fun, especially in like a 5 or 6 person group. I feel like that's just the perfect amount for this.
Yeah, and it does play with a high higher player count. And if you have multiple copies, you can get bigger and bigger. We played a Just 100 where we played with 100 people at a convention. So it can really be a big party.
Yeah, you can play with anybody. The next one on our list is Skull King, and Skull King is a trick-taking game. So you're really going to be able to get anyone who's into card games into this game because that's what it is. It's a trick-taking game. It's got some special cards. They're going to beat other cards. But the cool thing, well, there's a few cool things. One of the cool things is the beginning of each trick, you bet how many you're going to win. And all you can see is your cards. You don't know anything else. But you bet how much you're going to win. And if you win, you get like 20 points for each one. And if you lose 20 points for each one you're wrong. And if you bet 0, you win or lose 10 points times the number of cards. So everything's these giant swings. And also, the really cool thing is, and why it's so great for new players, is your first hand's just one card. Then you play 2, then you play 3, then you play 4, then you play 5, and you go up to 10. But the great thing is that for 1 and 2 and 3, it doesn't really matter. And so you've got like 3 built-in learning rounds to teach people this game. And by the time you get to 4 and 5 and 6, they got it, they're into it, and that's when the points really start to matter.
Yeah, and it is just really fun also when everybody does their betting because you do like 1, 2, 3 bet and like you have to stick your like fingers out, and so it's fun to be able to do that. But there's so often that you are going to be wrong and lose like 80 points that it becomes ridiculous. It's nice that you don't get so invested that you have to win when you're like, I'm at minus 100 over here. But it could mean that, rounds 9 and 10, you could catch up as well. But it's nice that there's such massive swings and that people are all interested in what happens.
I've never had so much fun losing by 300 points. And the fun thing is actually, if you start to lose early game, it kind of makes you play risky, which is the more fun way to play. So then you're playing for those, like you're betting 0 because you can get a lot of points, but it's really hard because everyone else wants you to win a trick too. And you know what everyone else bet. So you really want to screw them over. So it's like a mean trick-taking game. And yeah, it's so easy to teach people who like card games, and it's like just a little bit sillier and a little bit more fun.
The next one is Kites, which is a real-time game. And in Kites, you are trying to keep the kites all flying. And they are represented by these sand timers that all have different values in it. And so when you play a card, that is the sand timer that you get to flip. But as you go around and all the timers are going at different times and getting closer and closer to running out, it gets really frantic. And everyone's calling out of like, we need the red, I don't have red, and move on to the next person. And then there's special cards that get thrown in as well.
Yeah, and those special cards are fun as well because there's one like you got to switch cards. There's one where someone yells plane and then everyone has to be quiet because the plane's too loud for your yelling. And there's one that's thunder, and then you flip all of them at the same time. And that one is actually almost helpful because it kind of lets you reset. But this game is a lot harder the more people you have. And I think a lot more fun. When you play this with like 6 players, it's so hard. But it's great because it's one of those games that you play and you lose, and then everyone's like, let's do it again. We can do it. And then you play and you lose. Let's do it again. And I think last time we played with 6 players, we ended up playing this dumb game for like an hour just so we could beat it. When we beat it, it was exciting.
Did we beat it in the
end?
Yeah,
we did. We finally did beat it. But it was like a big, we succeeded. Now let's all go home. The next one is for smaller 4-person parties, and this is P is for Pizza. And I got to put a little disclaimer here because I am friends with the designer of this game. Usually I don't put games in that I'm friends with the designer, so that really just means I like this enough that I put it on this list anyway, even though I'm friends with the designer. And P is for Pizza is probably my favorite just like word letter game. This kind of replaced categories for me, and I love categories. And so what it is you got these triangles like pizza, and you got one in the middle that's got 3 categories. You got 3 on the outside that have letters. And then you got to yell a word that matches that category and that letter. And you got to make a pizza.
Yeah, and then there are different colors associated with each of the different letters. And so it's a nice little catch-up mechanic because once you have your first layer done and you move on to the second, you can't use anything that has the green clue, which tends to be the easier clues as well. And it's you are terrible to play with because Sean will just start saying words even though that they don't match up, and that totally interferes my thought process with what I'm thinking of. So as I'm about to say something, he'll just say something that isn't an answer at all. And I'm like, oh, what was that? And then come up with the answer.
Yeah, it's a great trick. I just start yelling, Tunisia, Uganda, Ralph Malph, Happy Days. And Jess is like, what? None of those, what are you doing? And then meanwhile, I'm like, oh, rhubarb. And yeah, it's a great confusion tactic that you could use in this. But it's such a silly, fun letter game. You really don't need to know anything. Like, it's not trivia. It's just like, name a fruit, name a 5-letter word, stuff in the sky. It's all super simple. So every round is like 10 seconds.
Yeah, this is a great one to play with people who don't play modern board games, but who grew up playing Boggle or Scattergories or Scrabble. And the nice thing about it is it does not overstay its welcome. The next game is Dixit, which is a bit of a modern classic, but for a good reason. In Dixit, everybody has a hand of cards, and each of these cards have these lovely little pictures on them. And one person will choose one of their cards, and they will say a word or a song lyric or whatever they want to describe that picture. Everybody else then looks at their hands of cards and has to pick one that they think matches that. So maybe it would be like childhood. And then everybody has to pick a card that they think represents childhood. They all get shuffled up, and then you have to try and guess who it was that gave that clue. And it's just delightful. I am terrible at it, and I'm quite competitive, but I just can't be competitive in this game.
No, I've never even come in the top half of people in this game, and I don't care at all. And it's great too because you try and do little inside things that a few people are going to get, because one of the big things is you don't want everyone to get it and you don't want nobody to get it. You want a few people to get it, just like 2 or 3, just a couple people to get it. And that's like the sweet spot. So you got to find something that those few people, you're like, faster pussycat, kill. And the 2 people who know what that means are like, oh yeah, I got it. And then everyone else just puts a cat. And so it's something you got to find those little hidden gems.
Yeah, I think that's part of the challenge is I really want to describe it literally. But I think usually everyone guesses exactly what I mean by that, because I'll be like, a long climb up, and it'll be just like stairs. And everyone's like, oh, it's obviously that one.
And the art is just, you're like fascinated by the art. My mom I used to play this with my mom all the time. And what she would always do is whoever's the storyteller gets all the cards. And then they're supposed to shuffle them up, and then they put them out. But she would get all the cards. She would, when it came to hers, just put it down. Then each other one she would look at, oh, and then put it down. Oh, and then put it down. Each one. So every single time my mom, how do you all guess mine? And it's such a joyful thing. And yeah, this game has traveled from Canada to New Zealand to London to Scotland. Our box doesn't even, it's mostly tape. I still love this game.
Yeah, the art is phenomenal.
Our last one on the list is Draftosaurus. And I know we didn't say that this is top 10, and it's not. But this is also my favorite. Draftosaurus is a dinosaur drafting game. And you're putting your hand in a bag, you're pulling out wooden dinosaurs, and then you're picking those dinosaurs, you're putting them down in your dinosaur pens, and you're passing the rest around. And that's all there is to it. And it's great because you got this pen, and it's feels a little bit like a roll and write game. Each different pen on your little board have different things that they need. So they need all the same dinosaur. They need like every second dinosaur to be the same. They need all different dinosaurs. They need pairs of dinosaurs, whatever it might be. So you need to make that match as well as you can and not give other people what they need to match. And you're doing it all with fun wooden dinosaurs.
It is just really fun to reach into the bag and grab them. And we thought at first we would be able to feel what dinosaur you were getting, but you can't. They all feel the same. And just have this handful and to pass it. We played with somebody who gets like really sweaty palms.
Oh, yeah.
Really
You get these wet dinosaurs.
Yeah.
They're all water dinosaurs.
But it's so great. It works really well because it's clearly laid out on the board what needs to go where. So very easy to pick up. There's two sides, so people will usually want to play the other side right away. It works for larger groups, and it works great for a 2-person party too.
Yeah, this is one of the very few, I was going to say the only, but there have actually been a few more that have come out in recent years. But this is one of the few, and maybe still my favorite, draft and pass game for a 2-player. Because you take one and then you chuck the other one into the box. Like, you do not get this. And that part of it's really fun too.
And it's dinosaurs, wooden dinosaurs, teeny little dinosaurs. Who doesn't love dinos?
And that is it. And just in time too. My voice is almost gone. The storm is raging outside. But that is 10 great party games that, honestly, I'm very excited to play with folks here in Scotland.
Thank you so much for watching. Please let us know in the comments if you played any of these games or what party games you recommend. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we will see you next time for another game.